Welcome to my writer's room. I'm BT Higgins. Welcome to Lesson 4.2. Hey, I was thinking about what I should talk about for Lesson 4.2, and it occurred to me that most of the story types that I discuss and the examples that I give come from the types of stories that I enjoy. And it occurred to me that you might not like the same stories that I like. And so I'm going to do a series of lessons where we talk about some of the different options for the styles of story. Perhaps you'll like something that I don't, and so I don't want to ignore you. I want to give all of the options just because I do fantasy or action adventure kinds of stories doesn't mean you need to. If you don't like that kind of thing, skip it. There's lots of options. So today we're going to discuss the five sort of buckets or categories of creative writing, or of writing, and then we're going to look at one of the literary genres that I hate the most, which you might enjoy. And so we're going to discuss it, and I'll tell you why I don't like it, and I'll tell you a little bit about it. It might be your perfect thing, and so that's what you should jump into. Okay, so first, the main five areas where you can write. Okay, bucket number one is poetry. We talked about poems not too long ago. There's a whole bunch of different kinds of them, and you can write poetry and spend your whole life writing good poems and be a poet, and that's very satisfying, and that might be your thing. Short, little rhyming poems, that's your thing, option one. Bucket number two is drama. Drama is like something that's going to be performed, like a live play. So that might be screenplays for movies, or it might be a play for being performed on a stage. Bucket number three is prose. Prose is story writing. Basically, think of novels. Anything that it doesn't have the rhyming structure of poetry. It's not meant to be performed out loud like a drama, although you can do an audio book or an audio performance of a novel. But the prose is where I do most of my stuff, and perhaps that's the same for you. It has a different set of rules and structures than screenplays. We'll discuss all of those over time and later. Next bucket is nonfiction. Nonfiction is something I've not done, although I've got a ton of ideas of different nonfiction books I can do as well. Nonfiction simply means true information type stuff, whether it's how to how to fix a leaky toilet, or it's a nonfiction, a biography about this historical person, or I guess memoir could be also. That's where you're kind of telling your own story, but that might get into prose because it might be a little fictionalized. I don't know, but you could do nonfiction, how to build a rocket. There's tons of that, because it's not always about stories. Sometimes it's about learning. And nonfiction, that's your bucket. If you love that stuff, nonfiction is huge, and it's very important. And then the last bucket you can do, it's called media, and that's anything that's a movie, that's a TV show that it's meant to be watched or heard. So I guess this would be the bucket for audiobooks, which is another thing I do. But it's also any kind of technology-based stories, and that's a whole lot. In fact, that's probably the most popular because a lot of people don't even read books. Okay, and so you can go into telling stories in that way as well. Okay, so those are the main buckets or places you can put your writing creativity. I choose prose most of the time, but that's just because I like reading novels. All right, so let's take a look now at kind of subcategories of prose. Actually, it could be a subcategory of any of these different ones. Here's the one that I hate. I hate horror stories. I think they're horrible. That doesn't mean you have to think that. You don't need to agree with me. But I just don't like to be scared. I'm kind of a lightweight. I don't want to be scared just for fear's sake. What I don't like about horror stories is they're okay. First of all, they're deliberately told to scare or frighten you. through the suspense or the violence, or a lot of times it's just shock, or graphic death scenes, and they're not really told as a part of the story. Like part of the character, or part of like the supervillain, or they're not as much integrated into an engaging, psychologically interesting story. They're a lot of times more just jump scares. I don't like jump scares. Now, a jump scare is something that it jumps out on screen or in that moment and terrifies you at that moment, but it doesn't have a lot of context, and it doesn't have follow a thread of stuff through the whole line. Now, if you're a horror story aficionado, you know that I'm already contradicting myself, because a lot of horror can be written really well. It's got a scare, it's got monsters, it's got ghosts, it's got whatever, and it can be written with all of the quality of any other genre. And honestly, those ones that have more more story, are more up my alley. I like the story to be strong, and some horror does that, because horror is massive. I mean, I don't know if you're talking about werewolves and vampires or survival horror, all kinds of things. There's a lot of possibility, but I don't like the horror that's just designed to look terrifying, just designed to be scary, with weird images, gross images, ghost images, just meant to give you that shiver up your spine, and that's all. If that's all that there is, I just don't like it. That isn't all that's in the genre. But oftentimes that's the turnoff, is that the fact that it has that kind of stuff. I just don't like that. And I'm not sure exactly why, but I'm kind of thinking that I have a different worldview. See, a horror story has to come from I guess it's maybe like a pessimistic view of the world, where the status quo is just negative. It's sort of a meaningless, or it's like the evil in the world is so great that it's unavoidable, and all you can do is just try to survive, or maybe not, because it's just so horrible. In fact, some people had said, I got a quote from a guy named Sean Coyne. He said, the horror story is an allegory for the horrific world we presently or could soon inhabit. An allegory simply means a tale that points back to real life. Well, for me, the world isn't all horror in real life. There's so many bad things in real life, but there's also good things in real life. And I just prefer to have a balance between those two things, the good and the bad. And maybe it even, just for the story's sake, it can be tiresome to have it be all dark all the time, all meaningless, all hopeless. And yes, there's the big monster that's so hugely, massively strong that I have no hope of getting him. Now, there is some satisfaction when the character in a horror movie, the main character, actually does stand up against the monster and does find a way to kill him, because that's a satisfying, sort of ending. But if the world is something you don't even want to root for, I just find myself not loving it. And so those kinds of horror stories where it's like total depravity, everything's falling apart, the status quo is like total wickedness, total corruption, and there's no letdown for calm, and there's no possibility for good things. I just don't care to open up that kind of world. And so that's why I don't like horror. That doesn't mean you don't, you need to not like horror. Perhaps you like gore stories, or perhaps you want to write monster stories, or there's a million like werewolf and vampire stories. It'll be effective, and it'll be good stories if you make it rich. Don't just make it about the scare. Don't just make it about the horror. Make it a quality story. And to be honest with you, there's for a lot of years, there's a lot of good, well-written stories that are in this genre. It's just not my go-to. And I definitely don't write these kinds of stories. Perhaps, though, this will be just your thing. If it is, go for it. See what kind of fun you can have with it. Although, seems to me see what kind of scariness and horribleness you can have with it. All right. See you later.